I never thought I'd raise a hand to my own child. Not after everything I sacrificed. Not after the hours I broke my back in that boiling factory just to keep food on the table, lights on in our crumbling kitchen, and gas in the rusted-out minivan that only I ever drove. But that night, something inside me snapped. And if you've ever had the person you love more than your own life look you dead in the eyes and spit venom with a voice that isn't theirs, that's when you realize something's rotten in the walls of your own home. Something you ignored for far too long. She stood in the doorway of the living room, arms crossed like a stranger, wearing that look I'd only ever seen on her mother's face, a look that could turn blood cold and make you doubt your worth as a man in under 5 seconds. And when she called me a loser, in front of Lisa, who didn't say a damn word to stop it, I saw red like I haven't seen since I buried my father. It wasn't just the word, it was the tone, the rehearsed cruelty, the flicker of satisfaction on her face when she said it, like she'd been waiting for that moment, coached on exactly where to drive the knife to make sure it broke off inside me. My hand moved before my brain did, like a reflex, like something primal taking over, and the slap that echoed through that stale living room was louder than the TV, louder than Lisa's gasp. Louder than the 20 years I've given to a woman who hasn't looked at me with love since our daughter was in diapers. I didn't slap her because I wanted to hurt her. I slapped her because, for the first time in my life, I saw the last good thing I thought I had slipping through my fingers, twisted into something ugly by someone I sleep next to every night. She ran to her room, slamming the door like a thunderclap, and Lisa just stood there, arms limp, mouth slightly open, blinking like she was trying to squeeze out fake tears but couldn't muster the effort. No screaming. No outrage, just that cold, smug look that said this was exactly the scene she'd been waiting for. I didn't say a word, didn't follow my daughter, didn't apologize. I just sat down on the couch where the cushion sagged, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I let my anger simmer instead of swallowing it. Because in that silence, I knew this wasn't just about one slap or one word. This was the unraveling of something deeper. This was the beginning of a war I didn't start, but damn sure intended to finish. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, no lights, no TV, just the sound of the old fridge kicking on every few minutes and the occasional creak of the house settling around me like it, too, was tired of holding secrets. I kept seeing my daughter's face in my mind, not the face she made after the slap, not the shock or the tears, but the face she made before, when she called me a loser. That look of pure, practiced contempt. And the way she said it. Not like she was lashing out in the heat of an argument, but like she was quoting someone. That's what finally cut through the guilt. Because deep down, I knew my little girl hadn't come up with that word all on her own. That wasn't her speaking. That was Lisa's voice coming out of her mouth. And once I let myself go there, once I peeled back the curtain on that one realization, the floodgates opened wide. Suddenly, 1,000 little moments made sense. The cold shoulders, the sarcastic tones, the accidental comments my daughter would drop about how I'd never do anything fun, or mom works harder anyway. Even though I was working double shifts at the plant while Lisa sat at home and complained about migraines that only seemed to show up when laundry needed doing. I started remembering the way Lisa would roll her eyes behind my back when I talked, the way she'd whisper with our daughter in the other room, then go silent when I walked in. I thought it was just teenage moods or mother-daughter bonding. But now, looking at it through the crack in the glass, I saw the truth staring me down like a train at the end of a tunnel. Lisa hadn't just poisoned our marriage, she'd poisoned my daughter against me, drip by drip, until the well ran dry. And what made it worse, what made it nearly unbearable to admit, was that I let it happen. I gave her the space, the control, the benefit of the doubt, all while I worked myself into the ground trying to be a provider, a protector, a man worth respecting. But while I was breaking my body to hold the house together, Lisa was working just as hard, tearing it down from the inside, brick by brick, lie by lie, smile by smile. That slap, the one that still burned in my memory like a scar on my hand, that was just the match. The fire had been smoldering for years. And now, I was finally ready to see the smoke. What I didn't know then was that the smoke was coming from more than just my daughter's words. It was rising from secrets so rotten they'd make me question every year I spent building a life with a woman who couldn't wait to watch me burn. 3 nights after the slap, while pretending to be half asleep on the recliner with the TV humming low, I overheard a conversation that changed the way I looked at my wife forever, and I've been carrying that moment like a loaded weapon ever since. Lisa had stepped outside onto the back porch, phone in hand, her voice hushed but not enough to avoid carrying through the cracked kitchen window, and I didn't even realize her sister Melissa was on speaker until I heard her laugh, that same bitter, high-pitched cackle I used to think was harmless. What started as idle gossip about someone from their church unraveling into something darker, meaner, and far more personal. I sat frozen as Melissa asked casually, "So are you still seeing that guy from O'Malley's? Or did he finally get tired of playing house?" And Lisa, with a laugh I hadn't heard in years, light, free, disgustingly flirtatious, answered, "Please. These bar guys are easier than microwaving popcorn. One gets boring, another one shows up. These losers are all the same." I don't remember breathing during the rest of that call, only that I didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't move a muscle as she listed off excuses she'd been using: migraines, errands, girls' nights. All while her sister egged her on like they were teenagers passing notes in class. They even joked about how I never ask questions because I'm too busy working or too tired to notice, and in that moment, the last pieces of the puzzle slid into place with the kind of sickening clarity that makes your stomach turn cold. Her late nights? Never work-related. Her sudden need to shower as soon as she got home? Not about hygiene. The way she barely touched me in bed anymore, like I was a stranger she was politely tolerating, that wasn't marital fatigue. That was guilt buried under layers of manipulation. And worst of all, the way she'd been smiling more lately, laughing louder, wearing makeup even when she was just going to the store? That wasn't happiness. That was indulgence, the kind you think you deserve after destroying someone who trusted you blindly. The next morning, I said nothing. I got up before sunrise like I always do, packed my lunch, and headed off to the factory like a man in handcuffs marching back into his own prison, except this time, I kept my eyes wide open. From that day forward, I watched her like a hawk, pretending to be the same tired, clueless husband she'd built her lies around. I noted every time she left the house without explanation, every late return where she mumbled something about Melissa needing help or some friend I'd never met before, every glance at her phone she angled just slightly away when I walked into the room. I began to notice how quickly she could lie, how easily she slipped into it, like breathing. And for the first time in a long, bitter while, I didn't feel heartbroken. Because when someone starts playing games in the house you built, they forget the rules were written by your hands. And mine were about to start flipping the board. You ever feel your heart start pounding not because you're scared, but because you already know what you're about to see is going to shatter something in you forever? That was me, sitting in my truck on a Tuesday night, parked half a block down from O'Malley's, a low-life dive bar with flickering neon, sticky tables, and the kind of clientele that smells like stale regret and cheap cologne. Lisa had told me she was heading to Melissa's for wine and Real Housewives, but I'd seen enough Real Housewives in this marriage to know that show didn't end with her pulling into a parking lot full of rusted-out Chevys and half-lit cigarette butts. I watched from behind tinted glass as she strutted through the door like she owned the place, makeup layered thicker than usual, heels too high for someone just unwinding, and a dress that looked like it belonged to a version of her I hadn't seen since our honeymoon. A version she never brought home. 45 minutes passed. Then an hour. My hands never left the steering wheel, my jaw locked so tight it ached. When the door finally opened again, the air left my lungs in one slow exhale I didn't even realize I'd been holding. There she was, wobbling slightly, giggling like a teenager, her hand gripping the shoulder of a man I recognized immediately, Doug Crenshaw. Town drunk, 3 DUIs, fired from the lumber yard for showing up high. A man who once pissed himself in the middle of a gas station and had the audacity to laugh about it. And there she was, my wife, sliding into the passenger seat of his dinted blue sedan like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she hadn't left a man back home who'd been splitting his soul in two for 2 decades just to keep her warm. I didn't follow. I didn't start the truck. I just sat there, the engine cold, and watched her drive off into the night with a man who didn't even have enough self-respect to keep his license. I didn't sleep that night, but I did make decisions. Cold, clear, surgical decisions. The next morning, while Lisa was in the shower pretending she hadn't just been off staining motel sheets with a human ashtray, I slipped a tiny voice recorder under the driver's seat of her car, one with a motion trigger and enough battery to run for days. That night, while she was picking up takeout, I installed another one behind the dresser in our bedroom, tucked beneath a stack of her rarely used scarves. Then I synced her phone to an old device I had tucked away from when our daughter needed an emergency replacement. Now I'd see her messages, hear her calls, trace her steps. Not because I needed to catch her. I already knew. I needed proof, irrefutable, brutal, humiliating proof. Because whatever fantasy world she thought she was living in, the one where I was too blind, too tired, or too weak to notice, was about to come crashing down around her, and this time, I wouldn't be the one left holding the pieces. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in slow, like cold water filling up your boots, drowning you inch by inch until your breath shortens and your heart forgets how to beat the same way. That's exactly what I felt the moment I plugged in the voice recorder I'd hidden in Lisa's car and heard the first few minutes of her conversation with Melissa, a casual catch-up that spiraled, within seconds, into pure venom. I sat there in the garage, laptop open, headphones on, the smell of grease and metal around me, trying to convince myself I was ready for whatever I might hear. I wasn't. I wasn't even close. "He's too stupid to notice anything," Lisa said, laughing in a way I hadn't heard since our daughter was born. "He works 16 hours a day and still thinks I'm home watching reruns and folding laundry. I've earned this. I deserve a little fun. I'm not some housemaid in an apron waiting for him to give me permission." Melissa didn't even try to talk her down. She encouraged it. She giggled, she fed the fire, she whispered things like, "You've put in your time, sis," and "he's just a paycheck with boots." The audio continued for over 30 minutes, half an hour of my wife dismantling our entire life together like it was some joke from a sitcom she'd grown tired of watching. She called our marriage a prison without bars, and mocked the way I'd saved up for our anniversary trip to Asheville, the same one she faked a stomach bug to avoid. She even bragged about how she kept one guy around for the attention, another one just for the truck, and another because he still had hair. Every detail was a punch to the gut, but it was what came next that finally knocked the wind out of me for good. Lisa, in the same flippant tone you'd used to discuss what takeout to order, casually dropped, "I already talked to that lawyer Terry recommended, the sneaky one who knows how to gut a man without leaving blood on the walls. Once I file, I'm taking everything. The house, the truck, even the savings account he thinks I don't know about. Let him cry to his time card." I must have sat in that garage for 2 hours after the recording ended, staring at the laptop screen like it was some portal to a version of my life I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything, even though every nerve in my body screamed for violence, for revenge, for justice. What I did instead was lean back in my chair, press play again, and listen one more time, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to feel it. I wanted to soak in every word, every insult, every damn laugh that proved the woman I married had been chiseling away at the walls of our home for years while I was out breaking my body to keep them standing. She thought she had won already. She thought I'd never hear the words she only ever said in secret. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I wasn't planning to beg or break. I was planning to bury her, and I had just found my shovel. The hardest part wasn't catching my wife in a web of lies, it was realizing that she hadn't spun it just around me, but around the one person I thought was still on my side without question. My daughter. My little girl. The same kid who used to run to the door when I came home from work, arms open wide, shouting "Daddy's home," like I was her whole world. That's why I waited until Lisa was gone, out on one of her errands that I now knew ended in motel parking lots and back seats of strangers' cars, before I sat down with my daughter in the kitchen, just the two of us. Just like when she was little and we'd make grilled cheese and talk about her day. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse, didn't even bring up her mother, I just asked her if she thought I was a good dad. Her face twisted instantly, like she'd been waiting for that exact question, and without hesitation she muttered, "Mom said you'd try to act like the victim." That moment felt like watching someone else speak through her. Her lips were moving, but the voice wasn't hers. It was rehearsed. I asked her what she meant, trying not to let the lump in my throat betray how deep the knife had gone. And then she unleashed it, a list of grievances that didn't belong to her. "You're never around. You only care about work. You're always tired. You drink every night. You're a nobody. Dad, you don't even try anymore." I sat there, completely still, letting her words crash over me like waves against a seawall. I wanted to tell her the truth, how I worked double shifts not for me, but to keep the lights on, to pay for her braces, to put gas in the car she took to school. How I came home dead tired but still managed to fix that squeaky door in her room, still showed up for every recital, still made her pancakes every Saturday until she got too old for it. I wanted to tell her I hadn't touched a drop of alcohol in over 8 years, not since I buried my brother after his liver failed. But instead, I just nodded, swallowed my pride, and said, "Is that what your mom told you?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence between us was louder than any scream she could have thrown at me. It was the sound of years of poison taking root, of a mother who needed a scapegoat so badly she turned her own daughter into a soldier in her private war. I didn't fight back that night. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I kissed my daughter on the forehead, though she flinched, and told her I loved her, even if she didn't believe me right now. Because I knew something she didn't. Truth always comes out. And when it finally does, when the fog lifts and she sees her mother for who she really is, I want her to remember this moment, not for the pain in my eyes, but for the calm in my voice. Because the day's coming when she'll look back and realize that everything she hated me for was a lie whispered in her ear by someone who never deserved her love in the first place. There's a moment every man hits, the exact second where pain transforms into purpose, where heartbreak calcifies into strategy, and that pathetic ache in your chest gets replaced by something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. That moment for me came the day after my daughter called me a nobody. I'd spent years dragging my exhausted body home from that factory, smelling of oil and iron, convincing myself that loyalty and sacrifice were enough to earn respect in a house I built with my own hands. But now I knew better. So I took off work that morning, used a sick day I'd been hoarding for emergencies, and walked into the office of a divorce attorney whose online reviews were brutal, brilliant, and exactly what I needed, a woman named Connie McAllister, known around town as the Widowmaker. When I sat across from her and laid everything on the table, the recordings, the affairs, the manipulation, the way Lisa had turned my daughter against me, she didn't gasp, didn't flinch, didn't offer empty sympathy. She smiled like a surgeon handed a scalpel and said, "Let's gut her." From that moment on, I wasn't a broken husband anymore. I was a man on a mission. Connie gave me a list of documents to gather: bank statements, credit card histories, tax returns, even the grocery store receipts Lisa used to throw at me when she was too tired to cook. That night, while Lisa was passed out in our bed after another girls' night that probably ended in someone else's, I spent 5 straight hours digging through every file cabinet, online portal, and shoebox of paperwork in the house. I found enough hidden charges and shady cash withdrawals to choke a forensic accountant. I opened a new bank account in my name only, routed my paycheck there, and had my HR department switch the deposit with zero notice to Lisa. She wouldn't see it coming until the mortgage was due. And while she slept, I copied the audio files to an encrypted drive, downloaded footage from a cheap but effective camera I'd hidden in our bedroom lamp, and clipped together a neat little portfolio of shame. I didn't just have proof she cheated. I had proof she was evil. The next day, I handed everything to Connie, and when she saw the footage of Lisa sneaking a half-dressed man out of our house while our daughter was asleep down the hall, she didn't say a word. She just shook her head, opened her laptop, and said, "Let's file this thing so fast her lipstick won't dry before the sheriff knocks on her door." And right then, I realized something else. Lisa thought I was slow, stupid, predictable, a man she could use up and discard, just like the dirtbags she let grope her in bars and whisper sweet lies between cigarette drags. What she didn't know, what she never bothered to learn, was that I was done playing the fool. I wasn't here to get even. I was here to erase her. There's a strange kind of peace that settles in your chest when you finally stop begging to be loved by someone who only ever saw you as a tool, a wallet, a punching bag, and work boots. That morning, a Saturday, perfectly ordinary in every visible way. The sunlight coming through the window, the coffee brewing in the background, my daughter still asleep upstairs. I sat down across from Lisa at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in my hand and a sealed envelope in the other. She didn't notice anything at first. She was scrolling through her phone, smirking at whatever digital fantasy world she lived in, probably texting one of the losers she'd been slipping around with. When I slid the envelope toward her, she looked up slowly, her eyes narrowed, not in confusion. No, that came later, but in arrogance. Because in her world, I was still the dumb, obedient factory husband, too tired to question anything, too loyal to even imagine betrayal. Until she opened that envelope. The sound she made when she read the header, "Petition for Divorce," was somewhere between a bark and a laugh. Her mouth twisted into this cruel little grin, the kind she wore every time she thought she had me cornered, and she snapped, "Really? You think you're going to win this game?" But I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just reached into my jacket pocket and laid out a second envelope. Thicker, heavier, full of printed transcripts, bank statements, voice recordings, screenshots, timestamps. A collection of shame so airtight you could seal it in a vault, and it'd still stink of betrayal. Her smirk died the second she saw the photos of Doug's car parked outside the motel, the transcript of her call with her sister, the receipts she thought I'd never find. "What is this?" she asked, but the tremble in her voice told me she already knew. "This," I said, calm as a surgeon sharpening a scalpel, "is why you won't get the house. It's why you won't touch my retirement, or my truck, or a single cent from the account I closed 2 weeks ago. This is why you're going to walk away with nothing but your reputation in ashes." She exploded, screaming, throwing her phone across the room, knocking over her coffee like it was going to intimidate me, but I didn't raise my voice, didn't break eye contact. I just stood up, slid a flash drive across the table, and said, "Make sure your lawyer hears it all before they try to bluff." And then I walked out the front door, not because I had to, but because I wanted her to know I didn't need to shout to win. She'd spent years underestimating me, feeding lies to our daughter, sleeping with trash, thinking she could burn the house down and still own the ashes. But the truth? The truth is, she thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers, not realizing until it was too late that I'd already taken her queen and left nothing but a board full of empty moves. And in that moment, as I stepped into the morning sun, I wasn't broken. I wasn't humiliated. I was free. The last time Lisa walked through our front door, she wasn't wearing heels or carrying that smug smile she used to flash whenever she thought she'd won. No, this time, she was barefoot, furious, and holding a crumpled notice in her shaking hands. An emergency court order granting me full occupancy of the house and temporary custody of our daughter, effective immediately. She screamed, of course, accused me of manipulation, of setting her up, of turning our daughter against her, as if I'd needed to lift a single finger to do what her own actions had done so thoroughly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply stood in the living room, the one I built with my bare hands, and told her the truth. This house was a home until you set it on fire. Now you don't get to stand in the ashes and claim it. The sheriff waited just outside while she grabbed a single suitcase, screaming promises of revenge, of lawyers, of "you'll regret this." But by that point, the only thing I regretted was not waking up sooner. The moment the door shut behind her, the silence that followed was deafening. Not just the absence of yelling, but the absence of her chaos, her poison, her weight. What I didn't expect, though, was the knock on my bedroom door that came just an hour later. My daughter, the same one who'd once called me a loser, a nobody, stood there with tears in her eyes and a shaking voice as she asked, "Can I stay? Please." I didn't know. I didn't say yes right away. I didn't rush into forgiveness. I told her that trust isn't something you demand. It's something you earn, and she'd have to show me through her actions that she was done being her mother's puppet. She nodded. No argument. No eye rolls. Just quiet, trembling acceptance. That was the moment I knew the grip Lisa had over her was finally broken, not by force, but by truth. Lisa tried to fight, of course, dragging every sleazy dollar store lawyer she could afford into court, but the evidence I had was a sledgehammer. Financial fraud, adultery, parental alienation. The judge barely let her speak. Now, it's been just over 7 months. The house is quiet, but it's clean, not just the rooms, but the air, the energy. I replaced the curtains she once picked with her nose in the air and repainted the walls with the help of a woman I met at church. Someone soft-spoken, kind, and quietly curious about the man who once gave everything and asked for nothing. We're not rushing anything, but she makes me smile, and that's more than Lisa ever did on purpose. And as for Lisa, she's exactly where she belongs, broke, bitter, and reportedly seen outside O'Malley's bumming rides from the same men she once snuck into motels behind my back. My daughter comes by every weekend now. We talk. We cook. We heal. It's not perfect, but it's real, and that's more than I ever got when I was fighting alone inside a house filled with secrets. Turns out, when the house of cards collapses, the one who stood silent the longest is often the one still standing when the dust settles.